The Valoran Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships numbered in the millions. Their soldiers were countless. They had conquered 700 different species across the galaxy, and not one had ever given them a real fight. The Valorans believed they were the masters of all creation. They believed nothing could stop them. When their scout ships found Earth, they saw nothing special. It was a small blue planet circling a yellow sun. The creatures living there called themselves humans. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 100 years ago. Their entire military fleet had less than 200 ships. To the Valorans, they were insects waiting to be crushed. High Commander Tarn sat in his massive throne aboard the flagship, Victory of Ages. His gray skin was smooth and perfect. His 4 eyes glowed with the confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. He looked at the images of Earth on his screen and felt nothing but boredom. "Send them the standard message," he ordered. "They have 72 hours to surrender. If they refuse, we will burn their world to ash." His advisor, a thin Valoran named Kel, bowed deeply. "It will be done, High Commander. Though I wonder if we should simply destroy them now. They are so primitive." Tarn waved his long fingers dismissively. "Let them surrender. Slaves are more useful than corpses. Besides, I want to see the fear in their eyes when they realize how hopeless their situation is." The message traveled across space at the speed of light. It reached Earth within hours. Admiral Kang Tai-ho received the transmission aboard the carrier Indomitable. He was a man of 53 years, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt. He had led rescue missions to distant colonies. But he had never faced anything like this. He stood in the command center with his 2 most trusted officers. Captain Park Yuna was his tactical officer, a woman of 40 with sharp eyes and a brilliant mind for battle. Commander Lee Jin-soo was head of intelligence, a quiet man who knew more secrets than anyone should. Together, they watched the holographic message. A towering Valoran appeared before them, speaking in a cold voice that had been translated into human language. "People of Earth, you have been discovered by the Valoran Empire. Resistance is not possible. Survival requires complete surrender. You have 72 hours to accept our terms. Your leaders will become our servants. Your people will work for our glory. Your world will belong to us. This is not a negotiation. This your only chance to live." The message ended. Silence filled the room. Jin-soo spoke first. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. "I have studied everything we know about the Valorans. They have done this to 700 worlds. Every species that resisted was completely destroyed. Every species that surrendered became slaves forever. There are no exceptions." Yuna's face was pale. "Their fleet is massive. 10 million ships at minimum. We have 187. The math is not on our side." Tai-ho said nothing. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his daughter was working on a research station. His elderly mother was living in a small apartment in Seoul, probably making tea and watching old movies. Billions of people on Earth were going about their lives, not knowing that everything was about to change. "What happens to the slaves?" he asked quietly. Jin-soo hesitated. "They work until they die. Their children are taken and raised to serve. Their culture is erased. Their history is forgotten. Within 3 generations, they forget they were ever free." Tai-ho closed his eyes. He thought about his daughter's smile, his mother's gentle hands, the cherry blossoms in spring, the sound of rain on the roof of his childhood home. All of it would be gone, not just destroyed, but forgotten, as if it had never existed at all. He opened his eyes. Something had changed in them. Something hard and cold and absolutely certain. "Activate Protocol Omega," he said. Eunice stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Sir, that protocol is theoretical. We have never tested it. We do not even know if it will work. And the cost, I know the cost." Tejo turned to face his officers. "I know exactly what we are about to do. And I know that if we do not do it, humanity dies. Not in battle, but in chains, slowly, painfully, forgotten." He walked to the communication console. His fingers moved across the controls. Throughout human space, every ship, every station, every colony received his message. "This is Admiral Kang Tejo of the United Earth Defense Fleet. By now, you have all seen the Valoran ultimatum. They want us to surrender. They want us to become slaves. They want us to forget who we are." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I have studied our enemy. They are powerful. They are ancient. They have conquered hundreds of worlds without ever facing true resistance. And that is their weakness. They do not understand what happens when you corner a human. They do not understand that we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." His voice grew stronger, filled with a fire that had been burning inside him all his life. "We are going to war. Not for glory. Not for conquest. We are going to war because the alternative is the death of everything we love. Every child's laugh. Every mother's embrace. Every dream we have ever dreamed. They want to take all of it, and we are going to stop them." He straightened his uniform and looked directly into the camera. "To the Valoran Empire, I have only this to say. You have made a terrible mistake. You looked at us and saw prey. You should have looked closer. We are not prey. We are the most dangerous thing in this universe. We are humans, and we do not surrender." The transmission ended. Across human space, people watched in silence. Then slowly, something began to happen. Fear turned to anger. Despair turned to determination. Ordinary people, teachers, farmers, engineers, artists, began walking toward recruitment centers. Ships that had been scheduled for retirement were pulled back into service. Factories that made civilian goods switched to producing weapons. The Valoran Empire expected surrender within 72 hours. Instead, they received a declaration of total war. High Commander Tarn received the human response with confusion. In 12,000 years, no species had ever rejected their ultimatum. He watched the human admiral's message 3 times, trying to understand. "They are insane," Kel whispered. "They must know they cannot win." Tarn nodded slowly. "Prepare the invasion fleet. If they want to die, we will grant their wish." But somewhere deep inside him, in a place he did not like to examine, a small seed of doubt had been planted. There was something in the human admiral's eyes. Something Tarn had never seen before. It would take him 2 years to understand what it was. It was the look of a species that had nothing left to lose. The first battle came 3 weeks later. Above the red dust of Mars. The Valoran advance fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a wall of death. 3,000 warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could crack moons. Their shields could stop nuclear explosions. Commander Tarn watched from his flagship as his forces spread across the sky like a net ready to catch helpless fish. "Scan for enemy forces," he ordered. "Detecting. 112 human vessels, Commander. Mostly small fighters and medium cruisers. Nothing of significant size." Tarn almost laughed. 112 ships against 3,000. The humans were not just brave, they were foolish. This would not even be a battle. It would be an execution. "Begin the attack," he said. "Show no mercy." Lieutenant Shohana sat in the cockpit of her fighter, call sign Ghost 7. She was 31 years old. She had been flying since she was 16. She had a husband back on Earth and a daughter who had just learned to walk. She kept their photo taped to her control panel where she could see it. Around her, 11 other pilots waited in formation. They were Phantom Squadron, the best of the best. And they knew they were probably going to die today. "Listen up," Hannah said into her radio. "The big ships will hold the line. Our job is to get inside their formation and cause chaos. Hit their weak points. Draw their fire. Make them bleed." One of her pilots, a young man named Baksung, laughed nervously. "Lieutenant, have you seen how many of them there are?" "I have." Hannah checked her weapons one more time. "That just means we cannot miss." The battle began with fire. The Valoran ships opened up with everything they had. Space lit up with energy beams and missiles, and weapons that humans did not even have names for. The human fleet began taking hits immediately. Ships exploded. Pilots died. The first minute of battle cost humanity 30 vessels dot, but the humans did not run. Admiral Tuho watched from the Indomitable, stationed behind the front lines. His face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. "Phantom Squadron, you are clear to engage," he said. Hannah pushed her throttle forward. Her fighter screamed into the enemy formation at speeds that would have killed most species. The G-forces pressed against her body like a giant hand trying to crush her. Blood vessels burst in her eyes. Her vision went gray at the edges. She kept flying. The Valorans had never seen anything like it. Their species could not survive more than 3 times normal gravity. Humans, they were learning, could survive 8 times that and still fight. Still think. SDI. LL Kill. Hannah's squadron tore through the enemy formation like wolves among sheep. Their small ships were hard to hit, hard to track. They targeted weapon systems, shield generators, engine cores. They did not try to destroy the massive Valoran ships. They tried to wound them, to slow them down, to make them vulnerable. A Valoran gunner finally got a lock on Hannah's ship. The blast tore through her left wing and sent her spinning. Alarm screamed. Half her systems went dark. Blood floated from a cut above her eye, drifting in zero gravity like red tears. Any other species would have ejected. Any other pilot would have given up. Hannah stabilized her ship with manual controls, wiped the blood from her eyes, and kept fighting. On the surface of Mars, the ground war had begun. General Beek-Suion stood in the command bunker beneath Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. He was 60 years old, a veteran of 3 colonial conflicts. He had never faced an enemy like this. The Valoran landing craft came down like rain. Thousands of them, carrying soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons that could level buildings, carrying the absolute confidence of an empire that had never lost. They expected the humans to meet them in open battle. They expected formations and strategies and the orderly conduct of civilized warfare. Instead, they found hell. The humans had spent the 3 weeks since the ultimatum turning Mars into a death trap. Every building was rigged to explode. Every road was mined. Every shadow could hide a soldier with a rifle. The Valorans walked into a nightmare, and they did not know how to wake up. Private O'Mara was 19 years old. She had joined the military 6 months ago, looking for adventure and education. Now she was lying in a crater, her left arm broken, her ammunition running low, watching gray-skinned aliens advance toward her position. Her squad was dead. Her commanding officer was dead. Her communication equipment was destroyed. She was alone. The first Valoran came over the ridge, and she shot him in the face. The second came right behind, and she shot him too. They kept coming, and she kept shooting, and somewhere along the way she stopped being afraid. Fear was a luxury for people who expected to survive. 7 hours later, When reinforcements finally reached her position, they found her surrounded by Valoran bodies. She had stacked them around her crater like walls, using her enemies as shields against her enemies. Her rifle was empty. She was holding a combat knife in her good hand. "Private? Oh," the rescue leader said, staring at the carnage. How did you do this?" Mira looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "They kept coming," she said simply. "So I kept killing." The Battle of Mars lasted 14 days. In the end, the Valorans won. They captured the planet. They raised their flag over the ruins of human colonies. They declared victory, but the cost, 800 ships destroyed, 40,000 soldiers dead, an entire generation of Valoran warriors gone, all for one small planet that should have fallen in hours. Back on his flagship, Commander Tarn stared at the casualty reports. His 4 eyes could not believe what they were seeing. They had expected 0 losses. They had received a massacre. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Kel stood beside him, his thin body trembling. "They are different, Commander. They do not fight like other species. They do not surrender when wounded. They do not retreat when outnumbered. They fight until they cannot move, and then they fight some more. That is insanity? Perhaps." Kel's voice was quiet. "Or perhaps it is something we have never encountered, something we do not have a word for." On Earth, Admiral Teho received the news of Mars's fall. He read the reports of human casualties, thousands dead, thousands more captured. He read the reports of Valoran casualties, far more than anyone had expected. His officers waited for him to speak. They expected grief. They expected despair. They expected him to finally accept the hopelessness of their situation. Instead, Teho smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just drawn first blood. "Good," he said quietly. "Now they are afraid." He turned to Captain Yuna. "Begin Phase 2. We are going to make them pay for every inch of space, every planet, every moon. We are going to make this war so expensive that they will beg us for peace." Yuna nodded. "And if they do not beg?" Teho's smile faded, replaced by something cold and hard and absolutely terrifying. "Then we will destroy them. Every last one." The war had only just begun. 6 months had passed since the fall of Mars. The Valoran Empire had sent more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. 50,000 warships now filled human space. Millions of gray-skinned warriors occupied human worlds. The Empire expected the war to end quickly after such a show of force. They were wrong. Yoon, Day One, had been a professor before the war. He taught history at a university in the Mars colony, specializing in ancient Earth conflicts. He had spent his life studying wars from safe distances. Reading about courage and sacrifice in old books. Now, he lived in caves beneath Olympus Mons, leading the resistance. The caves stretched for hundreds of kilometers, carved by ancient lava flows millions of years ago. The Valorans knew the humans were hiding somewhere below the surface. They sent patrols, drones, scanning equipment. They found nothing. The tunnels were too deep, too complex, too well hidden. And from those tunnels, Day One's fighters struck like ghosts. They attacked supply convoys in the middle of the night. They destroyed communication towers. They sabotaged power plants. They killed Valoran officers in their beds and disappeared before anyone could respond. The occupation was supposed to be peaceful. Instead, it was a nightmare. "They do not understand us," Day One told his fighters during a planning meeting. The room was lit by chemical lights, and the air smelled of stone and sweat. Every species they have conquered gave up when they lost. They accepted their fate. They became slaves quietly. The Valorans have never met a people who refused to stop fighting. His second in command was a woman named Kim Sira. She was 35 years old, with a scar running down the left side of her face. Before the war, she had been an engineer. She had a husband and 2 children. They had been in Seoul when the Valorans bombed it. Now she had nothing left to lose. And that made her the most dangerous person in the resistance. Sira planned their operations with cold precision. She studied enemy patrol patterns. She calculated ammunition supplies. She selected targets based on maximum damage with minimum risk. When she led missions personally, she never hesitated. She never showed mercy. She never smiled. The Valoran soldiers began to speak of her in whispers. They called her the Shadow Blade. They said she could walk through walls. They said she could not be killed. When prisoners were brought back for interrogation, they trembled at the mention of her name. One night, Sira led a team of 12 fighters to attack a Valoran command post. They moved through the darkness like water, silent and unstoppable. The guards never saw them coming. By the time the alarm sounded, half the Valoran officers were already dead. Sira found herself face to face with a Valoran commander, a tall gray figure reaching for his weapon. She was faster. Her knife found his throat before his hand found his gun. As he fell, he looked at her with confusion in his 4 eyes. "Why?" he gasped. "Why do you keep fighting? You have already lost." Sira leaned close to him so he could hear her whisper. "Because you killed my children, and I will not stop until every one of you pays for that." The commander died with fear in his eyes. It was an expression Valorans had never worn before encountering humans. In deep space, far from any planet, Captain Nam Ho-jin commanded what remained of the human guerrilla fleet. They were survivor ships that had escaped the major battles, volunteers who had stolen civilian vessels and armed them with whatever weapons they could find. They numbered less than 500 craft. Against the Valoran armada, they were nothing. But nothing can be very dangerous when it refuses to die. Ho-jin was 63 years old. His face was lined with age and sorrow. He had buried his son 10 years ago, killed in a mining accident. He had survived 3 different cancers. He had watched his marriages fall apart, his friends grow old and die, his body slowly betray him. And now, at the end of his life, he had found his purpose. "They call me the Ghost," he told his crew with a thin smile. "I like that. Ghosts are already dead. You cannot kill what is already dead." His fleet struck without warning and vanished without trace. They attacked supply convoys carrying food to Valoran soldiers. They planted mines in shipping lanes. They transmitted false signals that led enemy patrols into asteroid fields. They were a constant irritation, a wound that would not heal. The Valorans sent hunting parties to find them. The hunting parties did not return. One day, a young officer asked Ho-jin why he fought. He was just a boy, really barely 20 years old. He reminded Ho-jin of his dead son. "I am old," Ho-jin said, looking at the stars through the viewport. "I have lived my life. I have known love and loss and everything in between. But you deserve a future. You deserve to grow old in a galaxy that is free. And if I have to burn down the entire Valoran Empire to give you that chance, I will." The young officer was quiet for a moment. "Are you not afraid to die?" Ho-jin laughed softly. "I have been dying since the day I was born. We all are. The only question is whether we die for something that matters." Back on his flagship, High Commander Tarn received reports from across human space. Every planet they occupied was fighting back. Every convoy they sent was at risk. Every soldier they deployed was a target. The war that was supposed to end in weeks had stretched into months, with no end in sight. "How many soldiers have we lost?" He asked Keldot. His advisor consulted the numbers with trembling hands. 200,000, Commander. And counting. Tarn stared at the tactical display. Red markers showed resistance activity on every occupied world. Blue markers showed his own forces, spread thin, exhausted, afraid. What manner of creatures are these? He whispered, echoing a question he had asked before. But now it was not curiosity in his voice. It was something closer to fear. Kell spoke carefully. They are survivors, Commander. Their history is filled with war. They have fought each other for thousands of years. They have developed ways of fighting that we never imagined. And they have something else. Something we lack. What is that? Kell was silent for a long moment. Hope, he finally said. They believe they can win. They believe it completely, despite all evidence. And that belief makes them dangerous in ways we cannot calculate. Tarn closed his 4 eyes. He remembered the human admiral's message. He remembered the words, "We are the most dangerous thing in this universe." He had thought it was boasting. He had thought it was desperation. Now he was beginning to think it might be the truth. The war continued. And with every day that passed, the Valoran Empire bled a little more. 2 years had passed since the Valoran ultimatum. 2 years of blood and fire and death. The war had consumed everything. Admiral Kong Tae-ho stood before a mirror in his quarters aboard the Indomitable. The face looking back at him was almost unrecognizable. His hair had turned completely white. Deep lines carved his face. His eyes held shadows that would never fade. He had lost so much. His mother had died in a Valoran bombing raid, buried under the rubble of her apartment building. His daughter had joined the resistance on Mars and disappeared 6 months ago. He did not know if she was alive or dead. Some nights he was not sure which answer he feared more, but he could not stop, could not rest, could not grieve. Because the fate of humanity depended on what happened next, Captain Yuna entered his quarters. She looked as exhausted as he felt. "The council is ready for you, Admiral." He nodded and followed her to the war room. The council consisted of the highest-ranking survivors of human, military, and civilian leadership. They sat around a circular table, their faces showing the weight of decisions that had cost millions of lives. At the center of the table, a holographic display showed the current state of the war. It was not good. The Valoran Empire had committed over 200,000 ships to the conquest of humanity. They controlled Mars, the asteroid belt, and a dozen lunar colonies. Earth itself was surrounded, blockaded, slowly starving. "We cannot hold much longer," General Biksu Hyon reported. He had escaped Mars after its fall, and now commanded what remained of the ground forces. "Our supplies are running out. Our soldiers are exhausted. We have fought as hard as we can, but—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Tae-ho looked around the table. He saw despair in their eyes. He saw the beginning of acceptance. They were starting to believe that the end was near. "There is another option," he said quietly. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him. 2 years ago, I activated Protocol Omega. At the time, it was theoretical. A desperate idea from desperate scientists. Tae-ho pressed a button, and the holographic display changed. It showed a ship, a normal-looking cargo vessel, surrounded by complex technical diagrams. "It is not theoretical anymore." Dr. Shin Yuri stepped forward. She was the chief scientist of Project Black Sun, the secret program behind Protocol Omega. She was only 31 years old, but she looked 60. The weight of her creation had aged her beyond her years. "Protocol Omega uses our faster-than-light technology in a new way," she explained. "We accelerate a ship to near the speed of light, then we drop it out of FTL at a precise moment. The kinetic energy released is—" She paused, struggling to find words. "Massive," she finally said. "One ship, striking a planet at near light speed, releases energy equal to 1,000 nuclear weapons. Nothing can stop it. Nothing can defend against it. And we have built 200 of these ships. The room was silent. The implications were clear. Yuna spoke first. You are talking about genocide. I am talking about survival, Teho replied. His voice was hard. The Valorans have given us two choices, extinction or slavery. Protocol Omega gives us a third choice, victory. At what cost? Su Hyon asked. If we use this weapon against their homeworld, we become the very monsters we are fighting. Teho closed his eyes. He had asked himself this question every day for 2 years. He had lost sleep over it. He had prayed for another answer. But there was none. I know what we will become, he said. I know the blood that will stain our hands. But I also know what happens if we do not act. Humanity dies. Not just our bodies, our spirits, our culture, our children's futures. Everything we are will be erased, and no one will remember we ever existed. He opened his eyes and looked at each person around the table. Is that a better ending? To be pure and dead, rather than stained and alive? No one answered. Because no one had an answer, the vote was held in silence. Raised hands. Bowed heads. Tears that no one wiped away. In the end, Protocol Omega was approved. The volunteers gathered in the launch bay. 200 pilots, each in their own ship, each knowing they would never return. They came from all walks of life. Soldiers and scientists. Teachers and farmers. Old and young. Men and women. Sergeant Ru Yunbai was 24 years old. She had lost her husband at Mars, killed in the first wave of Valoran attacks. She had volunteered for Protocol Omega because she wanted to make his death mean something. Lieutenant Moon Kang-ho was 47. He had watched his homeworld burn and had carried the guilt of surviving ever since. Now he had a chance to trade his life for something greater. Private Chang Nari was 19. She had never known a world at peace. She had grown up during the war, lost her parents to the war, and now she would end the war. It seemed fitting somehow. They stood in formation, facing Admiral Teho. He looked at them, these brave souls who had chosen to become weapons, and felt his heart breaking. I cannot order you to do this, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I can only ask, and I can only promise you this. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. 1,000 years from now, humanity will remember your names, your courage, your love for your people. He saluted them. They saluted back. Go now, he said, and may whatever God exists watch over your souls. One by one, the Protocol Omega ships launched. They accelerated away from Earth, away from everything they knew, toward enemy space, toward death, toward glory. Yunbai looked at the stars ahead of her. She thought of her husband's smile, his laugh, the way he held her hand on their wedding day. I am coming, my love, she whispered. Wait for me a little longer. Kang-ho flew in silence, his mind empty of everything except the mission. He had spent years hating himself for living. Now he could finally do something worthy of the lives that had been lost. Nari was singing. It was a song her mother had taught her when she was small, about a bird that flew so high it touched the stars. Her voice filled her tiny cockpit, brave and clear. Behind them, Earth grew smaller. Ahead of them, destiny waited. The Valoran Empire had no idea what was coming, but they would learn. Very soon, they would learn. Velar Prime was a beautiful world. It had green oceans and purple forests, and cities that stretched toward the sky like crystal towers. For 12,000 years, it had known nothing but peace. No enemy had ever reached it. No weapon had ever scarred its perfect surface. The Valoran people who lived there had never heard the sound of. War dot that changed on a quiet morning when the sky began to fall. The first protocol. Omega ship hit the military complex on the northern continent. One moment, it was a fortress covering 1,000 square kilometers, housing the pride of the Valoran war machine. The next moment, there was fire, a blast of heat and light that rose higher than the mountains. 2 million Valorans died before they knew they were in danger. Then came the second ship. It struck a shipyard on the eastern coast, where new warships were being built. The explosion created a crater so deep that the ocean rushed in to fill it, boiling away as it touched the superheated Earth. Then the third. The fourth. The fifth High Commander Tarn stood on the bridge of his flagship, which was now racing back toward Velar Prime at maximum speed. He watched the reports come in with 4 eyes that could not believe what they were seeing. His homeworld, his people, everything he had known and loved burning. How is this possible? He screamed at Kel. They are primitives. They are insects. How can they do this? Kel's voice was barely a whisper. They learned from us, Commander. We taught them that mercy is weakness. We taught them that the only way to survive is to destroy your enemies completely. They were good students. The Valoran Council sent an emergency transmission to every human frequency they could find. Their message was simple: ceasefire, immediate withdrawal from all human space, reparations beyond measure, anything, everything. Just please, stop. Admiral Kang Tai-ho received the message in his quarters. He read it 3 times, his hands shaking. Through the viewport, he could see the last Protocol Omega ships preparing to launch. He thought about his mother, buried under the ruins of Sol. He thought about his daughter, missing somewhere in the tunnels of Mars. He thought about the billions of humans who had died, the children, the innocent Then he thought about the Valorans dying on Velar Prime, their children. They're innocent. He closed his eyes and remembered something his mother had told him when he was small. Revenge is a fire that burns the one who carries it. He had been carrying this fire for 2 years. It had kept him warm through the cold nights of war. It had given him strength when he wanted to collapse. It had made him into a weapon that could save his species. But now the fire was threatening to consume him, to make him into the very monster he had fought against. With a hand that did not want to obey, he pressed the communication button. All Protocol Omega ships, this is Admiral Tai-ho. Hold your positions. Repeat, hold your positions. The enemy has surrendered. Silence on the other end. Then a voice Sergeant Yung Bai crackled through the speaker. Sir, are you sure? Tai-ho's voice was steady, but tears were running down his face. I am sure, Sergeant. Stand down. The war is over. The ceasefire was signed 3 days later in a ceremony that no one enjoyed. The Valoran representatives came with their heads bowed, their arrogance finally broken. They signed every document the humans put in front of them. They agreed to every demand. They surrendered everything. The Valoran occupation forces began withdrawing immediately. Ships that had terrorized human space for 2 years now limped home with their metaphorical tails between their legs. Soldiers, who had thought themselves conquerors, realized they were lucky to be alive. On Mars, General Yoon Dae-won emerged from his caves for the first time in 18 months. The surface was scarred and broken, barely recognizable, but the Valoran flag was coming down, and in its place, a human flag was rising. Kim Sira stood beside him, her face as unreadable as ever. She looked at the sky, at the Valoran ships retreating, at the world they had fought so hard to reclaim. We won, Baewon said quietly. Sira did not respond for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was strange, distant. Did we? She looked at her hands. Those hands had killed more beings than she could count. Valoran soldiers, Valoran officers, Valoran pilots. She had stopped seeing them as living creatures somewhere along the way. They had become targets, objects, things to be eliminated. "I wonder," she said, "if we are still human. After everything we have done." Day One had no answer. He had wondered the same thing in the dark nights underground, when the screams of dying enemies echoed in his memories and sleep refused to come. Captain Nam Ho Jin brought his guerrilla fleet home to a hero's welcome. People cheered. Flags waved. Musicians played songs of victory. But Ho Jin did not smile. He had lost too many friends. Too many of those young faces that reminded him of his dead son. They had won, yes, but at a cost that could never be repaid. Years passed. The Valoran Empire crumbled. Without their military might, without their reputation for invincibility, the species they had conquered began to revolt. Within a century, the empire that had ruled for 12,000 years was nothing but a memory. And humanity? Humanity spread across the stars. They built new colonies, made new allies, created a civilization that spanned 1,000 worlds. But they never forgot what they had done to survive. Admiral Kang Tae-ho died at the age of 87, surrounded by his daughter, who had survived the war, and his grandchildren. Before his death, he wrote a memoir that became required reading for every human student. The final words were these: "We did what we had to do. The universe is not kind. It does not reward mercy or gentleness. It rewards survival." And humanity survived. Whether we remained human in the process is a question I cannot answer. I leave it to those who come after, who will live in the galaxy we burned into being. May they be wiser than we were. May they find a way to be both strong and gentle, both fierce and kind. May they never have to face the choices we faced. And may they forgive us for the things we did in the dark. The galaxy had learned a lesson. When you threaten humanity, when you corner them, when you give them no choice but victory or extinction, they do not surrender. They become the deadliest force in the universe, and they will make you regret ever challenging them. But perhaps the greater lesson was the one humanity learned about itself, that survival is not enough, that victory without honor is hollow, that becoming a monster to defeat monsters is a tragedy, not a triumph. This was the true legacy of the human Valoran War, not just the strength that saved humanity, but the wisdom that followed. The stars watched in silence, as they always had, and humanity walked among them, carrying both their pride and their burden, forever changed by what they had done to live.